Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another video. There's another paid request, this time for Kathy. Thank you so much for that. And for those interested in requesting pretty much any type of videos, topics, randomness, out of the blueness, reactions, commentaries, re-reviews, reviews, whatever it may be, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this is for it's a documentary called Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked. It's pretty much a History Channel documentary. And it's one of those things that seems familiar, but then I'm like, no, I don't think I've seen it before. It might have been something that back to the day when I did watch cable, I flipped around and caught some of it. But Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked, it was for free on YouTube, and you could tell there's a thing on here that it was from the History Channel. And I guess it's one of those things where this must have been done, I want to say around, well, it was around 2001, 2002. Because, number one, Kevin Smith was in it, and he had a film behind him, and I think it was Jersey Girl. So, no, that was Jane Silent Bob Strike Back was 2001, so that must have been like 2003, 2004? Might be around there. 2003, 2004. I think it might have been 2004. I can't remember when Jersey Girl came out. I know it was before Clerks 2, which was 2006 or so. Anyway, it was around 2004, give or take. Definitely after 2001, because 9/11 is mentioned. But Keith David narrates it. Great choice. The voice of Spawn from the cartoon. Of course, he's also been in John Carpenter's The Thing as Childs. He was in They Live with Roddy Piper. Keith David, again, Spawn himself from the cartoon. Wonderful voice to narrate this. And it goes through a history of comic books as best as it can for, 90-some minutes. It goes into Superman, it goes into Batman, it goes into a little bit of Wonder Woman, the idea of sidekicks, bit of Captain America, about World War II, and how comics were being portrayed in World War II, and the importance of comics during World War II. It talks about how there's a bit where they were in trouble because the psychiatrist said comic books were bad for kids, and he wrote something called Seduction of the Innocent. And then you had the comic code, this code that was enforced on comics that they had to pass in order to get their comics released. These stupid rules, arbitrary rules, where you have to respect cops and you have to respect mothers and there could be no zombies and no vampires. And the introduction of Fantastic Four and Hulk and Spider-Man. The Punisher is mentioned briefly. Frank Miller about Daredevil. Watchmen is mentioned briefly. Dark Knight Returns is mentioned briefly. The market of comics, where a lot of people were buying stuff because they thought they would get rich, which didn't work out. I mean, it's only a certain amount of time, and comic books span so many decades, so you can't fit everything in there. No Death of Superman, which I was surprised, because I thought that was kind of a big comic event, the death of Superman. But that's never mentioned. I thought that was a bit weird. A lot of side comics are not mentioned, like Ninja Turtles, other comic properties like that. Those are not mentioned. I can imagine if that documentary was made today. I'm surprised someone hasn't done that. About how comic books are in such a dead zone today because of these forced politics that they enforce, and they want to impress people on Twitter, but they're not impressing any of the wallets. Anybody with a wallet, they're not being sold. These comic books come out with so much hype and then they fail either instantly or within a month. And yeah, if someone was truthful and put out a documentary about comic books today, It'd be a brutal affair, and I would love to watch it. Someone should do that, though, about how the death of comic books are among us because of not only so many stores being shut down because of the pandemic, not only because readers have gone on a stillborn because of, again, forcing all this politics. Okay, fine, Superman has a son who's gay. Okay, but what's the interesting story? We don't have an interesting story. It's just, that's what it is. That's what's to sell it. Okay, so it's a gimmick, not a story or actual character. But anyway, that's not what this is about. And a lot of good info. A lot of good info for people who don't know much about comics. You know, about Superman, only 2 creators believed in it. All the newspapers said no. I like this quote, comic books were the videotapes of their day. That's a good quote. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of us kids, we watch these VHS tapes, and even the collector's market, you say the same thing. People collect VHS tapes and sell it just like comic books. People interviewed the guy who created, S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, Steranko, which he did very surreal stuff when he worked on Nick Fury's S.H.I.E.L.D., which changed the game for a bit. He's interviewed. Frank Miller is in the interview. I'm surprised, Todd McFarlane isn't interviewed. I'm surprised it was Spawn and all this. I'm surprised. I'm trying to remember all the people. I guess there were a decent amount of people interviewed, but I guess there were certain people like, oh, okay. Kevin Smith was interviewed. I'm not surprised about that. But this is when Kevin Smith was actually... It's funny, you look at Kevin Smith, the cadence in his voice. This is when Kevin Smith did interviews, he sounded like a grown-up. He's talking very comfortably, and he's talking very straightforward, in a very normal, casual voice, and, he's talking to you, and he's acting like a grown-up. It's funny, when he started off in movies and doing interviews, he was a grown-up, and it seems like as time has gone on, he's acted more like a kid. More like a child. I'm like, isn't that supposed to be reverse? But then you watch old interviews with Kevin Smith, he's talking, regular. And I was like, oh, hey, yeah, this hyper, fake, phony persona. It just, one of the many things that just turned me off on Kevin Smith. Becoming... as time has gone on, he's become a worse writer. He's become a worse director. He's become a more hyper at talker. I miss the old Kevin Smith. But anyway. Yeah, it goes into the details. Superman. Goes a bit into Batman. By the way, this is what I feel about Bob Kane. F you, Bob Kane. Eat my D. Bob Kane, eat my ass. For those, I wish this went into that, but maybe this was before that. That was known. I don't know. Because at least they do mention the name Bill Finger. There's a documentary my friend Michael, the Choice Voice, reviewed, where there's 2 people that helped create Batman. Bob Kane and Bill Finger. But for years and years, Bill Finger was shut out, and Bob Kane screwed him over. Bob Kane lied and said it was all me, and Bill Finger didn't do anything. And then Bill Finger died poor and alone. He died in some flat, fell asleep, depressed, and never woke up. Bill Finger did. And you know what Bill Finger came up with? Bill Finger came up with the design of Batman, the way he looks. Bill Finger came up with the cape. Bill Finger came up with the cowl. Bill Finger helped co-create the Joker. Bill Finger came up with the name Gotham City. Bill Finger came up with the idea of Robin. Bill Finger came up with the idea of the Batcave. Badfinger came up with the idea of the Batmobile. So you just say Bill Finger did more than Bob Kane, but Bob Kane fucked him over and got everything. Got all the money, or got all the fame. Now they'll say Bob Kane and Bill Finger. I'm like, just take Bob Kane's name off and just say Bill Finger. But, so, fuck Bob Kane. He can suck my dick. And Bill Finger, it's a shame what happened to him. I feel really bad. Sadly, they don't go into that. I wish they did. I did. Maybe it wasn't known at this time. But if it was known at this time, they should have gone into it. But one thing I found funny when they were talking about Batman, Kevin Smith goes, Batman, it's his thought process behind it that makes him different. I know, I got roosters and all this stuff all behind. That always happens. It's funny, like I said, Batman, it's his thought process behind it, but then, you know, he hated the Batman for almost that same thing and that same reason. They talked to Will Eisner about his creation of The Spirit, which was a comic. They talk about how there was a point where this was a new thing that they did, the Submariner versus the Human Torch. And there wasn't the Human Torch Fantastic Four. This was a different, older, different type of Human Torch. And how, man, we all got in a room and we had to write like 40 or so pages in just a few days. And it was such a ruckus, they called the cops on us. They talk about the idea of sidekicks. And I like this. Stan Lee, he's interviewed. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. He mentions he hated sidekicks because he thought kids' sidekicks were so weird that Batman would be put in jail because of all the stuff he would put upon this kid and the danger he put this kid in. And how when Robin was introduced was a hit that everyone wanted a sidekick. The Human Torch and Toro, which they haven't even heard of that. Even Captain America had Bucky and all this stuff. But Stan Lee still was like, man, I hate sidekicks. Especially I hate kid sidekicks. Or maybe it was at least kid sidekicks he hated. Which I don't blame him, because I feel the same way. They talk about Captain America being created in World War II. About how even during World War II, the GIs, when they get supplies, sometimes supplies they would get with comic books. And a lot of the comic books would be patriotic, very patriotic, and punching Hitler in the face and all that stuff. Which you wouldn't do anything like that nowadays, even though I think it'd be richly deserved. Wonder Woman, which I didn't realize the person who created Wonder Woman was the person who also helped work on the lie detector machine. Guess that kind of makes sense because Wonder Woman has the lasso of truth. And about how after the war, comic books became more bland, more safe, more nice, less edge of any sort. And the Superman creators, they got fired. And it wasn't until like around the 70s or so where they finally got a bit of the piece of the pie again. And about how after the war, as you know, superheroes are done, and then there were comic books growing more that was about the undead or vampires or other stuff. And then psychiatrists called The Seduction of the Innocent wrote this book saying, oh, comic books are evil. Pretty much in his day, you know how people said video games were evil after Columbine? And, oh, games like Doom and all that stuff was evil after the Columbine school shooting. We gotta do more strict with video games, and they're corrupting our youth. This was the same thing back then, only it was comic books. And it was a lot of stupid BS. And they have to respect the cops, and the government can't be evil, and they have to respect mothers, and there should be no zombies, no vampires, nothing of that sort, no drugs. And then you have the introduction again, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Spider-Man. We all know about those characters. It was interesting to hear about a bit of Nick Fury's shield. I didn't realize how surreal those comics were. And this guy Steranko introduced that. That's something I didn't know about. Because I didn't read much Shield. I didn't know much about it. But that was cool to see some of the really psychedelic pages the guy was doing. And then, of course, Frank Miller with Daredevil, Watchmen. I was surprised Watchmen wasn't talked about a bit longer, since that's because they're such an influential book. Other than, some people, they will look at it and then they put it down and it's like, man, my stuff isn't good enough. I know I can do better. And The Dark Knight Returns, interesting, Frank Miller said when the book came out, he had writers of previous Batman books call him and say, you ruined Batman. You know that, right? You ruined Batman. So I didn't know Frank Miller got that kind of backlash from other Batman writers. And sadly, when it got to the end, that's when it's like trying to speed, very fast, like, wrap things up. Because I would just prefer than a part 2, if that's the case. Because then they go right to like 1996, Marvel filed bankruptcy, and I wish there was even more about, comic book prices going up and people were buying so many copies because they thought they'd hold on to them and they'd get rich later. And then, but the thing is, when they realized they weren't, they would stop buying. But on the flip side, comic book companies thought, wow, we're selling so much, let's make more. But then, oh my god, we made too much and we're not selling them, and that screwed up their money biz. And I didn't know Marvel filed for bankruptcy in '96. And they briefly go into movies, like they briefly mentioned Superman, they briefly mentioned Batman. But that's another thing they could have delved a lot more into, like Blade. Blade's not mentioned. I don't even think the comic is mentioned, let alone the movie, which helped start comic book movies back again. And that's what I mean by there are times where I wish this should have been like a series, like maybe by decade. I think maybe that could have helped. Like, here's the 50s. Here's a 90-minute documentary about the 50s in comics. Here's a 90-minute documentary on the 60s of comics, the 70s, the 80s. I think that would have been a lot better. That's the tough thing when you're trying to fit everything into just 1 hour-and-a-half long program. Just a lot of stuff either not mentioned, like Blade, Ninja Turtles, Death of Superman, all these other subsidiaries of comics. The 90s are kind of, like I said, briefly brushed on. Because after 96, they go to 9/11. And that there were comics made during 9/11. And that's not how the movie ends. Or the documentary ends. So yeah, it was interesting to watch. It was cool to see interviews with Kevin Smith when he was worth a crap. With Stan Lee. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. Although, yes, I will say more should have been talked about with Jack Kirby. Because Jack Kirby's barely mentioned. I think that was not right. Because, again, they mentioned a little bit of Stan Lee, but not nearly enough of Jack Kirby. He should have been mentioned more. If, again, there was any knowledge about the Bill Finger stuff, that should have been mentioned in it. But, again, maybe at this time they didn't know. Because I try to remember what year that came into prominence. And again, I think if you don't know much about comics, it's interesting to look. It's well edited, very well edited. That's one thing that was enjoyable. A lot of great, comic book panels, and it flew by, and it kept your interest. It was never boring. A lot of interesting little tidbits. Again, if you're not knowledgeable on comics, it's definitely worth a watch. Pretty cool to watch. Again, I just think in retrospect, it would have been better to do like a chronological do that type of product for each decade. I think whenever, like I said, you try to fit, what, how many decades? From the 30s, 1940s to 2004, there's just too much to fit in and not enough time. So, anyway, with that said, thanks for watching. Take care. Like I said, if you're into comic books, it's worth a watch. Keith David, great narrator choice, like I said before, sets the tone. A lot of colorful pages of comments, well edited. Thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.